Okay, perfect. Recording?
Yep, I did.
Okay, perfect. There we go. Okay.
And we're gonna get started in about 1 minute. Lee's so smart, she's got water, unlike
I'm going to talk to my Instagram people for a minute. All right.
All right, Bree, are we ready to get started?
We are. Let's do it.
All right. Welcome, everybody. We are super excited to be here on another Friday. I think this is episode 5.
Five.
Five of Beyond the Steps. It's hard to believe that we've been through 5 of these already. Had some very lively conversation, just been so proud and honored to be able to bring this type of information, this type of forum to the dance community. So thank you so very much for being here. If you're here in Zoom, thank you so much for being here. If you're with us over here on Facebook Live, like we start out every episode, we let you know that we're not in mission control at NASA here, even though it does feel like it, but you will see our attention turn from one place to the other. That's because we're managing our Facebook Live community over here, we're managing our Instagram community over here, and we're managing our Zoom community here in the room, as well as trying to get as much important information from our expert panelists as we possibly can. So please know we're not distracted, and we are distracted, but we're not ignoring you. We are trying to make sure we can get as many people in on the conversation as possible. With that said, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, things you want to know, please put them in the chat here in the Zoom. If you are on Facebook Live, please put them in the comments here on Facebook Live, as well as on Instagram Live. When we're there, you can definitely drop things there as well. I am Melissa McDaniel, owner of Turning Point Dance Creations, and here with my wonderful co-host, Bree from Apollo Performance. And this is our weekly series, Beyond the Steps, where we help the dance community in answering and tackling some of the challenging issues and questions that come up in our community on a daily basis. So today's episode is part of our Beyond the Steps series that we do every Friday at 2 p.m. And this falls into the category of gender equity and inclusion. And our question today is, what is the appropriate vocabulary to use when talking about gender identity and sexual orientation?
It's a big one.
Yeah, it's a big one. It's a big one. We've had a lot of talk around it here online, and we are just super honored to be able to do it because there's just so many courageous youth who are fearlessly coming out with their true identities, identifying as queer, transgender, and we need to support them. They're in our dance studios every single day. And unfortunately, the world has not quite caught up to meeting their bravery with being able to make these safe spaces for them in the schools, online, and even in their homes. They're not necessarily safe spaces. So we, as dance educators, of course, always want to lead. We have to lead, and we want to make sure that we have the tools and the resources to be able to make those safe spaces for them. So this right here is a safe space for us. I want us to know that 100% safe space. There'll be no harassment, homophobia, transphobia, degradation, no harmful language. We are affirming and we are supportive here in this space. If we hear that or we see that either on our Facebook comments or in our Zoom chats, we're unfortunately going to have to ask you to leave. And we will make sure that happens because we want to make sure that this is a safe space for everyone who is here. a lot of the controversy around this is about, oh, what are you telling children and they're not ready for this? And I mean, research definitely shows, and as a society, we actually impress a lot upon children very young when it comes to their gender identity and attraction, just basic attraction. I was talking to Bree when we were prepping for this, and I was saying that how many times have people come to a small child, 3, 4, 5 years old, and go, do you have a little boyfriend or a little girlfriend at school? But then when it comes to talking about gender identity, we're all like, oh, they're too young. We're already talking about attraction. We're already talking about sexual attraction with kids. So we need to make sure that we are supporting our students that we have in our studios who are identifying as something that's not necessarily heteronormative or what society has deemed as being traditional. So this is informational. We have a wonderful guest expert with us today. Bree is going to introduce them.
Yeah. And I just want to, follow up with what Melissa said. We're on this journey too. We're learning. I say this every week. We're learning right along with you all that are watching this. So we are on this journey, but it is important because as we've explored with our other guests and previous episodes, those of us that are working with minors, those of us who are in a leadership position, we really have this opportunity to advance our industry forward and to make those positive changes, especially during this time. So the more you know, the more you're educated, the better that you can do, and that we can all take this industry that we love to a better, more evolved place. And the goal, right, is to create happy, healthy dance spaces for all of our dancers, regardless of their race, their sexual preference, their gender identity, their religion. It goes their body type. It goes on and on and on. So that's why we're doing Beyond the Steps. So with that, we have Leigh Witzling with us. Leigh, thank you so much for being here. They are a white, queer, non-binary Jewish dancer and therapist living on native Abenaki land known as Southern Vermont. Leigh grew up in the dance studio world where they studied tap, ballet, jazz in St. Louis, right? For 12 years before finding their happy place in modern and improvisational techniques. After 3 years in an Illinois-based modern dance company, Back and To the Left Productions, Leigh moved to New England, where they built a life with queer joy, gentleness, gender euphoria, and juicy somatic practices, which we're going to learn about today. Leigh has a master's degree in dance movement therapy and counseling from Antioch University in New England, has worked as a school counselor, residential dorm head, and dance teacher, and now works as a private private psychotherapist, and primarily working with trans and gender nonconforming adolescents. So a lot of experience Leigh has to bring to the table today. We are so excited to learn from you, Leigh. Thank you for being here. You grew up dancing, and in many ways, it was a springboard for the direction you took with your career. How much work, in your experience and with the knowledge that you have, how much work is there to do as a dance community in regards to acceptance of gender identity and sexual orientation?
Whew, that was a mouthful.
I know.
Thank you. First of all, hi. Thank you
Hi.
so much for having me. Yeah, thank you for introducing me. You're right. I grew up in the dance world. I'm actually calling you from my childhood home in St.
That's
Louis.
crazy.
So yes, I work in Vermont, but I'm calling you from St. Louis. And right before this, I thought, well, let me think about that for a minute. So I did bring with me a picture of my
Wow.
Look at you.
self.
Way back. Are those
Fabulous.
cats over top of the white tap? Is a tap shoe?
Oh, they were tennis shoes. They were Keds.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Nicely done. Talk about a flashback Friday. Good job.
Like the year 2000 to an Austin Powers song.
Nice. Fitting. It's fitting.
So your first question, how much work is there to do among, what did you say, gender and sexual orientation?
Yeah, gender identity and sexual orientation. How much work is there for us to do as an industry? Because I feel like it's a lot, but maybe it's not. How do you feel about that?
So first, I want to answer that question by just locating what we mean by the dance industry and the dance world, because that can mean so many different things. I mean, a lot of people are dancers. Everybody in some way is a dancer. And so, I mean, every single human in the history of the world has moved their body in some capacity and has maybe danced. So I want to just make sure that we're talking about the context of dance studios,
We
contemporary dance.
are. Yeah, thank you for clarifying. And I know that's a big world. I'm talking dance studios, semi-professional, professional, when we're getting into dance education on all levels. That's what I'm referencing.
Yeah. And so I just want to name that by saying there are all these other places in which people are doing really, really well. I mean, if you're talking about voguing, right? That was started by gay people. That was started by queer people. There were indigenous people on this land doing dances specifically for two-spirit folks. Those are people who don't identify as men or women. They're doing dances around that for hundreds and hundreds of years. So they probably don't have a lot of work to do, right? In this industry that we're talking about Eurocentric, meaning coming from ballet, coming from mostly Western Europe dance styles that have evolved. We've got a lot of work to do. We really do.
Yeah.
And an amazing thing is that there are so many queer people in the industry, and that's not new. It's not brand new. I mean, look at any lineage of ballet, any lineage of modern dance, any lineage of contemporary dance. You will find queer people all over the place. If you've ever taught something by Alvin Ailey, if you've ever taught something by Isadora Duncan, or any lineage of those folks, you have taught something by a queer person. So it's in there, but we have to catch up, and we have to figure out, where did we lose this? And there's a lot to do. So I'd say this is why we're starting with 101. And if you don't know what you're doing, that's okay.
Yeah. And it's a lot, right? There's a lot to keep track, especially if you've never been conscious of this before. And I will again say that I am on that journey as well. So I want to dig into our first talking point. So often the concepts of gender identity and sexual orientation are merged. Like, I mean, we're doing that today for the purpose of starting this conversation and laying a foundation, right? But they're different. And there's, I don't know that people always understand what those differences are. Is that the correct way to look at these concepts? And please explain the difference between the two for those of us who are just learning.
Sure. So correct, incorrect, I don't know if I could
appropriate.
Yeah. I guess I would say, it depends on the context. I think the reason that we merge these things together so often is because the way that we define our sexual orientation, or the people that we're attracted to, or some people it might even say our romantic orientation, however we like to relate to people, gender often comes into play for a lot of people. Traditionally in the US, a lot of people, what you might be imagining if you're coming to this for a 101 session, you might imagine, well, men are attracted to women and women are attracted to men. So gender is obviously a part of that. So that's why we lump those things in together.
Right.
So gender is how a person identifies. So a person might identify as a man, they might identify as a woman, or they might identify as neither one of those things. And it might be somewhere in the middle or somewhere outside of those that have this totally expansive idea of how they identify. Sexual orientation is who we're attracted to. I also just use that word romantic orientation because some people don't want to think about sex. They're not thinking about sex. They're not at an age where they're thinking about sex, or they never think about sex. So we think about romance, and there are lots of ways to think about orientation, but sexual orientation, I think, is mostly what people think about.
So, and I want to ask this question now because I want people's minds to wrap around, when we're talking about this, we're talking about children and all the way up to adults. How early, what does research show? How early can children start recognizing these concepts and understanding these concepts and have awareness of these concepts?
Yeah. Children start to understand their gender when they are infants.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's because we are putting that onto them, right? So I'm going to bring back this picture of myself, and I'm going to ask you to tell me what about my outfit might indicate a gender?
The dress.
The dress. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
That's the band, the
shiny sparkles.
right,
Probably.
Yeah.
Right.
the whole
So
aesthetic.
yeah, now granted, I want to be very clear that I loved this dress. This is one of my favorite costumes of all time. Um, but someone might not love that dress.
Yep.
And I will say that even though I loved it, I didn't pick it out. My dance teacher picked out that dress for me, right?
Right.
So there was an instance where somebody else, an adult, made a decision that helped inform the idea that I was a girl. I was raised as a girl, and I no longer identify that way. But someone made some choices that said, this is what girls do. And so that's how I learned that. Now, this was probably age 7 or 8, but that starts in infancy. It starts from actually before infancy. Now, I can't say that we start to understand that before we're born, but gender reveal parties, that's a big hot topic. I think that's getting outside the dance realm, but I'm just saying that we as adults start to think about those things for our children before they're even born.
Right.
Right.
Yep, that makes sense. And so as dance studio owners and educators,
Mhm.
you know, you have to cater to a subset of parents, you have to cater to children, you have to cater to your faculty, you have to run a business.
Yes.
And you know, there's a lot of blurred lines here with parents in terms of what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. I mean, is the answer to stop putting our kids in dresses when they're little girls? Don't put them in dresses. Don't put them. What is how do we tackle that? How do we tackle that? Because
Yeah.
there's plenty of people that do identify as girls and boys and vice versa, and not at all. So how do we, as a dance community, make sure that we have that something for everybody?
Totally. It's a huge question,
It is.
right? And there are so many different pieces to look at that we can't possibly answer every single one
Yeah.
today in this moment. But I
Right.
think that the lens that I like to look at this is making sure that kids have choice, that kids have autonomy to explore. So I think there's this impression from people who are maybe new to this world, new to thinking about gender and new to thinking about sexuality, is that queer people want to totally eradicate gender, right? It's like, I can't make my baby's room pink or blue, and I can't put the girls in tutus, and I can't, put the boys in trucks. Well, it's not that. I mean, I, for one, love tutus. I was never a very good ballet dancer. I never got to wear the great tutu, and I was very sad about it. It's not that we're getting rid of trucks. It's not that we're getting rid of tutus. It's that we're making all of those things available to everyone.
Right.
So a really clear example of something you might do in your dance studio. Let's say you have a dress code. Maybe currently your dress code is girls in a small little kids class have to wear a pink leotard and pink tights, and boys have to wear a white t-shirt and black leggings. Say that's your dress code. What if your dress code says all children have a dress code which is either a pink leotard and tights or a white t-shirt and black leggings, and then they could choose, and that's the dress code. But if a girl walks in with a white t-shirt and black leggings, is it really gonna change much about your classroom if it makes them happy? And if a boy comes in wearing the pink leotard and pink tights and it makes them happy, is that really gonna change much about your classroom?
And again, you have a parent that may decide my kid is wearing the pink dress or my kid is wearing the black pants and the white t-shirt. However, as we can control our space and our area, and as studio owners, we're doing the service by making sure that we've got the option, that we're not saying it's this or that, it's any of the above. You pick what you're comfortable with.
Exactly.
Right?
And I would love to say, yes, let's help all the parents get on board. And that's not always going to be the case, and it's really hard. So you can control what is allowed and welcomed in your studio.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That
And
makes
that
sense.
even breeds to even a future episode, because like Leigh said, there's no way that we can tackle everything here today.
There never is.
Right. Never enough time. But when we do make that change to make the dress code universal, not the dress code based on gender, but a dress code that's universal, and we do have a child that identifies as a boy that comes in the pink leotard and tights, that's going to cause that could cause some type of hubbub or controversy within your studio. I think that in future episodes, we need to bring Leigh back and say, okay, what do we do with this, that has happened?
Yeah, because really you have the opportunity to set the tone for what happens in that instance. And if you're setting the tone of acceptance that it is you pick what you're comfortable with, and here are the options, then it really shouldn't be a big deal if you're setting the example of,
right.
This is okay. Like nobody makes a big deal about it. If a boy comes in a pink tutu, or a girl comes in black pants and a white t-shirt, it doesn't affect anybody. And it certainly doesn't change the dancing, because at the end of the day, they're there to learn how to dance. And however, that makes them most comfortable, then we need to make that happen. Right.
Exactly. And I think, and my dog is very opinionated about it.
We are live. It happens. My dog.
We are live, and he's very excited. Yeah.
He's like, and the dog is here.
I'm sure my kids will come running in at some point too.
Right.
It's totally the world we live in right now.
Welcome to working from home. That's how that works. So moving forward, the main goal and purpose of this episode was really to make sure that vocabulary was in place that dance studio owners, dance educators could use without because a lot of the hesitation comes when you're like, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to, oh my goodness, what if I say the wrong thing and offend someone? And what I have been trying to teach and coach people through is saying nothing and making no change is offensive in itself. So, to stand neutral is to stand on the side of the oppressor, which is a very famous quote, but a lot of people don't understand that. They feel like silence makes you okay.
And I do want to, before we move on, and Leigh, we want your answers on all of this, but it's important to know too, like, I can tell you, I get so stressed out and nervous when I'm talking, because I don't want to make a mistake and I don't want to offend somebody, and I want to do better. And I just maybe don't always have the information. How much should people sweat this stuff if we're trying, and if we're taking baby steps? Is that okay? Like, do we understand, on the flip side, is there an understanding that this is a process and we just appreciate that people are trying?
Yeah. I mean, the answer is try, just try, really just try. I mean, it's easy to get caught up in the little details. There's a lot of language. There are a lot of letters and acronyms and pronouns, and this stuff is confusing if it's not in your world.
Right.
For me, it doesn't feel confusing because I'm talking to queer people all the time, and I have to remember that the people who are trying to support me as allies aren't immersed in this world, and it's a new thing for them.
Yeah.
So one thing that I always say is, I would rather somebody use the wrong terminology, but really care about me and care about my well-being and support me, than get the terms right, but not actually care.
Right.
I mean, if you can use the lingo, but you're not really deeply invested in your students' well-being and life, then it's not that meaningful. And I would say the number one thing is, when you mess up using the right lingo, if you use the wrong pronouns, don't sweat it. Don't make a big deal out of it. Acknowledge it and move on. So if I misgender someone, what that means is calling them the wrong gender. So let's say you have a trans person in your dance class and they use they, them pronouns like me. You want to refer to them. If I was in your dance class, you'd want to say, they went to go dance over there. They went to go stand in the back row. If you misgendered me, you might say, she went to go stand in the back row. Oh, sorry, my bad, they. And then you move on. If you make a big thing out of it, then you're calling attention to it. It's embarrassing, it's awkward, you're making it about you. So you just try and then you move on, and people will see that you're trying.
Thank you for that.
Yes. And that's so true, because I do it all the time. I actually am immersed in this world, and I'm always, especially now that we're on Zooms and you're thinking fast and people are, and it really is really is important to acknowledge it though. It is important to acknowledge it, but then to move on, because everybody knows that's a learning moment, and then everybody feels more comfortable about doing the same thing. So I am going to give you, Leigh, just some terms that people might not have the correct definition for, and have you define them for people, and you can tell me what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, and what you think. We do have some questions bubbling up here in the chat, so I definitely want to get those out later. But the first one is transgender. Can you explain what that means?
Sure. A person who's transgender is a person who doesn't identify with the gender that they were assigned at birth. And when I say assigned at birth, I mean when you're born, you're in a hospital or in your house, wherever, and a doctor or somebody said, that's a girl or that's a boy. When I was born, someone said, that's a girl. And I don't really feel like that. So I would identify as transgender. Some people who are non-binary identify as transgender, and some people say, oh, I don't know, I don't really like that word, but I am non-binary.
Okay.
That's kind of an individual thing, just
okay. Okay. What about cisgender?
Cisgender. So someone who was assigned one gender at birth and does feel like that gender. So let's say you were born and a doctor said that's a girl, and you do feel like a girl and a woman. A lot of people might say cisgender is normal and transgender is not. That's not helpful. It makes transgender people feel like they're not normal, or it makes them feel like they're weird. It makes them feel othered. So using cisgender and transgender are words to put those people on equal playing fields and not make one feel like they're othered.
Right. Exactly. And this is a heteronormative culture. So all the assumptions are that everyone is cisgender.
Exactly.
And we have to make sure that we are cognizant of that just because you assume that is part of the heteronormative culture that we're trying to actually break down and move past. Non-binary.
Non-binary. So I identify as non-binary. Non-binary, it means a lot of things, to be honest. It means that someone doesn't identify as a woman or a man, or they identify as a woman and a man, or they don't identify on the binary. The binary is there's one and there's the other. There's two things. Non-binary can mean a whole slew of things. Maybe I'm right in the middle. Maybe I'm somewhere outside it. I like to picture it as what's it called? Like when you're picking a color on the computer and it's like that wheel with all
colors.
So it's not a spectrum from like girl to boy. It doesn't work like that for me. It's like there's that color wheel and you could pick one particular dot on it, but it's so specific. It's like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Homosexual.
Homosexual. Okay. So this is a term that originally, basically it's a medical term. It means a person who's attracted to the person of the same sex. Homo is the same. People don't really like this term anymore because oftentimes it's used in a derogatory way. Nobody that I know personally in the queer community says homosexual in like a casual way. Usually it's used as a negative term. And the reason for that is homosexuality was actually considered a mental health disorder in the field of psychology for many, many years until psychologists realized, oh, wait, we were totally wrong. So it has that stigma attached to it. So homosexuality is a word that really is kind of dying out. You probably shouldn't use it casually unless someone gives you explicit permission to, but you could use gay or lesbian.
Okay.
I did not know that. That is a great lesson.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is back to, I guess, your question about, oh no, what if we get it wrong? I think it's usually very clear what your intention is when you're speaking. If you've ever used the word homosexual and didn't mean it in a derogatory way, people probably picked up on that. So as long as you're trying your best, people will pick up on it. But once you do learn something new, then you can apply that. And that's what you can do.
Right. Application of learning.
That's
is
great
very important
information.
in this space.
Yeah,
So I do want to flag that because application of learning is very important in this space because
I'm writing it now.
it becomes very evident when you do correct someone or you do have a moment of learning and the person reverts back to what they did originally. It becomes very clear that there's no commitment to actually affirming. So
We're gonna have you back and talk about that.
right, yes, yes, we're going to have to circle back on that one because
you don't know, but once you know, you have to commit to show that you
right.
That's
Yeah, once you know, you have to have a conviction around doing it. And you can make mistakes, but you have to, I mean, it's the worst for me when I have someone that does say something that use the term homosexual and they're like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, queer. And so he's a homosexual and you're like, no, you're not. I just told you.
Right.
Like, so application of learning, we'll have to circle back around. Queer.
Yeah. So queer, a lot of people say that this is an umbrella term. A lot of times you'll see LGBT or you'll see LGBTQ. The Q is for queer or sometimes questioning. But the word queer, it means a lot of things to different people, but it basically means I fall under this umbrella and maybe I identify as many of these terms or some of these terms, or they don't really define me. Queer is actually a verb originally. I mean, we use it as a noun in a lot of ways, but to queer something means to veer off a path. So for me, being queer means I'm not just gay, I'm not just bisexual, but I'm like actively doing a thing where I'm veering off a path.
Consciously, like you're consciously.
I'm choosing to like be different because it feels good to me. The word queer can be confusing for people who are allies because queer has for a long time. I'm so sorry, dog is so excited.
Chime in.
For a long time, queer has been used as a derogatory term. I'm gonna take you on a little walk with him. But queer people have reclaimed that term to say, actually, this is great and we like this term. So it can be really complex for people who are allies and are not queer to use that term. The rule basically is, unless you have permission, don't use it. But if a queer person says, hey, you can call me queer, then you can use it. But I wouldn't call someone queer unless I knew them and they said, this is how I identify. If someone said, I'm gay, call them gay.
Right. And people identify with more than one thing. Like
Totally. Yeah. And queerness can describe gender and it can describe sexuality. It can describe a whole lot of things.
Okay.
Is there a way, Leigh, to when you walk into a room and you want to be sensitive to someone's gender identity or someone's, just let's say gender identity, because sexual orientation is really no one's business until you get to know them. But you want to be sensitive to the gender identities that are in the room. Is there a way that you say, hey, so what's your gender identity? But instead of assuming,
like everybody needs like a tag or a sign.
Right, like, is there a way to do that's comfortable and appropriate and one that, you know, is affirming?
Totally. So I want to just touch on what you just said too, which is that, oh gosh, I just lost my train of thought.
We said the tags,
oh, you said something before that I wanted to touch on.
So when you walk into a room, is there a way that you can survey to make sure that you're being sensitive?
Yeah, there definitely is. Whatever you said right before that, I'll come back to it. But you walk into a room, first of all, avoid saying things like, hey ladies, or hey guys, like things that have gender attached to them. Oh, I got it and I don't want to lose it. You said
I'm
something
completely guilty of that. I'm guilty of that when I do that with people that I know and I'm really comfortable with. But I am guilty of that.
Yeah. I want to jump back while I remember this thing that you said. You touched on sexual orientation and gender, which is that it's nobody's business. In your dance studio, sexual orientation doesn't really matter. I mean, in terms of how you're treating your dancers, it matters to the people, but it doesn't matter in terms of
Your
how you
dance.
teach them, how you treat
Really, if
them.
they want to choreograph a dance specifically about that's like partnering with, that's, related to their sexual orientation. But we're really talking about gender because that's what's relevant, is someone being seen in their identity.
We have a couple really great questions coming up, and I want you to tackle non-binary before we answer these questions, but they're really good ones. So tackle non-binary for us.
We already
Yeah,
did.
I'm going to tackle your still walking into a room question. I think I said non-binary, right?
Yes. Okay. Yes.
I got you all over the place. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. We jumped back for a minute, but
yeah. So when you walk into a room,
yeah,
avoid saying things like, "Hey, ladies," "Hey, guys," because you might not know everyone's gender identity. And the thing is that even in your own classroom, even if you know the name of every single person, even if every single person is wearing a leotard and tights, you might have someone who is questioning their gender inside. And
right.
just by not using that gendered language, you might be helping them a little bit. Because sometimes I'm in a room and I haven't changed my body. I look like a woman a lot. I get misgendered often, and I know that about my presentation. It's
Right.
not a secret. But when someone says, "Hey, ladies," to a group of people, it doesn't feel good because it's not how I identify. And I'm choosing actively not to change my appearance. In order to find out how people identify, you could have name tags. Great. You could have pronouns. So your pronouns are the words that you use to indicate your gender and to describe people. So my pronouns are they, them. And like I said, you might say they stood in the back row, or they stood in the front row, or they're about to do a grand jeté. You might say she's about to do a grand jeté about a girl, or he's about to do a kick to a boy. You can ask someone their pronouns. And the way that I like to do this in a classroom is this. On the first day of class, I like to do a go around, get to know you game. Nobody is too old for this. You can do this with adults. And a quick go around, I always ask their name, their pronouns, if they want to share them. And then a third thing, like your favorite dance move, your favorite ice cream, your whatever. The reason I do this is because someone might not want to share their pronouns in a whole group of people. Maybe they're confused, they're questioning their gender, they're not ready to share them. They don't actually feel comfortable sharing them in that group, but they don't want to lie about it and say the wrong pronoun because that doesn't feel good either. So you say pronouns if you choose, and then that third thing, so you know when they're done. So let's say I'm someone who I don't want to share my pronouns. I might say, "Hi, I'm Leigh, and I like to do a grand jeté." And then you know that I'm done speaking. Some people might just forget to include their pronouns, and that's okay. You move on, you don't question it. So that's a really great way of doing it.
Yeah, that's
and
awesome.
that has become very standard now. Even on Zoom, usually I forgot today, of course, to rename myself, but I will put my pronouns in parentheses.
Yeah, that was a question I had for you later. So what is that? Should that become a standard? Is that something on Instagram, on our social profiles, on on Zoom and all these web conferences and virtual meetings? Should we be having our pronouns on there to make it more normalized?
So my answer is yes.
Is that something that would be helpful?
With an asterisk. The answer is yes. In general, it should be standardized. I think when you have your pronouns in your social media profile, in your, your name on Zoom, or you say them in class, it makes it so much easier for people to feel like they can share them. It's great. It should be a standard. I have two things to add to that, though. One is when cisgender people, meaning people who use the pronouns that they were assigned at birth, when they have their pronouns in their profile, I see that as an indicator of someone who gets pronouns. I'm like, okay, you have pronouns in your profile, so you care about pronouns, so you care about gender and transgender issues. So what that says to me is I can go to you to talk to. That's really, really important. So I say, if you're a dance studio owner, if you're a teacher, whatever, put it in your profile, put it in your Zoom bio or your Zoom name. but you have to then do the work to be
That's what I
someone.
was just going to say. Then that also, though, on the flip side, makes you're making a conscious choice that you are now going to hold yourself and around those around you accountable for that
Yes,
information.
exactly. And the second thing I have to say is that you shouldn't go around forcing people to put their pronouns anywhere, because someone might be actively choosing not to. It could be
Right.
dangerous for them because they're transgender and they've been harassed or assaulted. They might not know what their pronouns are because they're questioning. They might not be out to everybody, or they might use different pronouns in different contexts so that they can feel safer. For example, there are places where I don't feel safe using they them pronouns. And so
Really?
yeah, yeah, I'm afraid of harassment, um, and bullying. I mean, it's a huge issue, and we can talk about that in a little
Yeah.
bit. So they might choose not to. So don't go around going, you have to put your pronouns in your bio, but it's something that you can do as an example for other people.
Right. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. So we have a couple of really great questions. Elizabeth Kessler, she, her, Ella, to everyone, is how do you approach discussing this with an older generation? Which I love this question because I also want to know the answer. My dad still hears queer as it was meant decades ago and doesn't think anyone should use it. It was similar, I'm sure, to what you were saying about the term homosexual. Working really hard to say, hey, dancers, hey, guys, is so automatic for me, and I'm practicing getting out of it. That's great. Elizabeth, thank you so much for that question.
Yeah, that's a great question. I want to just give a shout out to my parents who are trying so hard and trying to figure it out. And I get it. When things are new and different, it takes time. And all I would say is people who have a lived experience are the people who get to decide how they talk about that lived experience. Yeah, if it might feel weird for someone from an older generation to say the word queer, and that makes sense because they're wanting to do the right thing, they're wanting to be kind. And if they are LGBTQ, they might say, I don't want to identify as queer. That makes a lot of sense. But if I, as a younger person, come and say, I identify as queer and I want to reclaim that language, then someone who is cisgender and straight, if they haven't lived that experience, it's not really theirs to decide.
Right. And I mean, I guess we could apply that thought process to race.
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
So many of the other heavy discussions that we're having in our culture right now in our society.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's a good way to think about it. It's just that explaining this conversation to people who are more old school in their thought process, and it's really a struggle. I guess that's where how do you have the patience and the you know what I mean, to like explain and not lose, just completely blow your top and explain and I guess you have to give people grace, because otherwise you're never going to get anywhere if you're just fighting constantly with people about it. But how do you explain it to those people who are just very resistant to this shift?
Yeah. So the biggest thing that I can say is meet people where they're at. Um, if you are a cisgender straight person, if you are not part of the LGBTQ community, it is your job to be the welcoming committee, to meet those people where they're at, figure out why they have this resistance. This can be applied in a lot of other areas too. For example, I, as a white person, I have to be the welcoming committee to other white people. I have to figure out what's going on with your thought process. You said something racist. I'm not actually going to scream and yell at you. I have to be the person who says, okay, what's going on? And when they make a tiny little change, I have to congratulate them.
You have to go overboard applauding that
Exactly.
step, because it's a big step for that person.
Exactly. Whereas when I'm talking about racism, a person of color, they don't have to applaud white people, right? Right. So
Right.
when we're talking about, gender and sexuality, for me as a queer person, I might get really tired and I might go, oh my gosh, okay, this person, like they're really behind. I'm annoyed because it impacts me
Right.
personally.
It's
I'm
personal.
feeling
Right.
the effects. But someone who's not in the LGBTQ community and doesn't have personal effects, they're not at risk of harassment and assault. They're not getting bullied at school.
Mhm.
They're not at a higher risk for suicide.
Mhm.
They should have the extra energy to say, I'm going to meet you where you're at. You just made this tiny little change. I'm so proud of you. I'm going to cheer you on. You have to be the cheering committee.
Mhm. It's the advocacy and allyship, and it's not performative allyship. We talked about this in a previous episode. Not performative allyship, but actually active allyship, that you have to adopt. That is, I think, active allyship. I think that's a future episode, Bree.
Got it.
Uh,
Jack,
active allyship.
we have another one from Kayla Frails on Facebook Live. What are y'all's thoughts about masculine plus feminine movement as a choreographer working with kids? And oh my gosh, another just full circle moment for me, Melissa. I don't know for you, but I definitely have been guilty of this in my past years of, dance more feminine or dance more masculine.
You should be dancing like a boy, and
Yes.
you should be dancing like a girl, and
And
you should. Mhm.
instead of approaching it from, you need to develop more strength, you need to develop more upper body strength or something like that, you're saying you need to dance more like a boy. So what are the harmful effects of that? Or are there harmful effects? I guess what Kayla's asking is what are your thoughts on it, and what are the ramifications of speaking in that way?
Yeah. Oh, such a good question. I love this question. And this could be its own whole series. I mean, this could go on for hours and days and days and days. We could have
Yeah, that's
workshops.
frequently what we run into. Yes.
I know. I'm like, how can I even answer that question? The answer is, if you say you need to dance more like a girl, I guess I would say, ask yourself why. Ask yourself why you're telling someone that.
Mhm.
It's not automatically wrong, right? Like I said, gender is not a bad thing. We're not trying to create this world where everything is green and there's no pink and blue and there's no tutus and there's no trucks, and there
Mhm.
might be feminine movement and masculine movement. But what does it mean to say dance more like a girl? Like, what are you even saying? I don't really even know what that means. What I would say
Is the feminine masculine, is that the right way to say it, or is there a better way to say that?
well, I would say, rather than saying, is there a better way to say that? I would
Because
just say,
I would say traditionally, I think the problem is, and we've explored this now in every crevice of the dance world. The problem is that dancers are steeped in tradition,
right,
and they do what they were taught, and you dance, you learn, you grow up, you become a dance teacher and an educator, and you do what you were taught. There is no regulatory body, there's nobody setting the tone, there's a bunch of pocket organizations that are doing a lot of really great work, but nobody's really linking elbows and linking arms and saying we need to speak the same language, and this is what that language is, right? So that is 100% in my mind where the problem lies. Now, so when you say what does feminine and masculine mean in traditional mindset, and I can say, like I said, I've experienced this, I've gone through this. Feminine means, you're using your hips, you're embracing you're dancing with those traditional feminine qualities, and you're dancing more masculine, you're strong, you're sturdy, you're
Assertive movements.
you're tough, you're aggressive, that's, I think, the traditional mentality when we use those terms.
right. So I guess my response to that is, things that are feminine and things that are masculine are not bad. Gender
Mhm.
is a great thing, and having gender in movement and in dance is a great thing. I mean, all of this that we're talking about around gender is, how do we experience gender in our bodies and how do we express our gender? Like, that's a great thing. So if we identify moving our hips and whatever it is as feminine, or that strength and sturdiness and more stiffness with masculinity, that's not a bad thing.
Right.
I think the bad thing is when we force people, because of the body that they were born in, to only dance a certain way.
Certain way, right.
So I would say there's nothing wrong with saying, this piece of choreography was created to be very feminine. But I think there is a problem with saying, I'm only going to allow people who were born with vaginas
Mm-hmm.
to
Dance this way.
feminine things.
Mm-hmm.
Because the thing is, you probably shouldn't really know what that part of your dancer's body looks like.
Right.
I mean, unless you are in the room when they're changing.
Right.
You know, it's
Right.
all irrelevant.
Yeah.
It just doesn't change the reason we're there. We're there to learn to move, to dance, and how we learn to move. If even making one person feel safer and more comfortable because we're making these changes in our verbiage, if that is helpful, then we should be willing to do that, right?
Yeah. So I think that using the language around femininity and masculinity is not bad, but it's recognizing that there's a conversation to be had around that. So maybe say to your students,
Mm-hmm.
this choreography was created by so and so, or I created this choreography to be feminine. Anyone who wants to come out on the floor and try it in a really feminine way, why don't you try it? Anyone who wants to try this masculine way
Mm-hmm.
can try it. But that's different than saying this is girls' choreography or boys' choreography,
Mm-hmm.
right? That feminine and masculine is different than girls and boys.
Right. And I will often say, this is a style. I need everyone to try this style. Not this is a feminine style or this is a male style. Like this is a style of dance, and I want everyone to learn and have a greater grasp on a wide range of styles.
Mm-hmm.
And just like you said, I mean, I think you hit on a great point in, even if you do say feminine, why do you only have to put it on one group of people?
Exactly.
You can have 50% boys in your class identifying boys and identifying girls, and that style is the same regardless of who is in your class.
Exactly.
And there shouldn't be shame placed upon choreographers or dancers who may be male identifying or even male presenting and are doing what is considered a traditionally feminine style. We place the shame on it. It's not the shame that's actually on the style. It's the shame that we assign to it when, you know, it's not necessarily heteronormative. That was a great conversation. Like you said, we could probably expand that to 5 or 6 episodes. Yeah, for sure. But we definitely want to move on to our next topic.
Yep, that's you, girl.
Oh, is it me? Oh, wow.
Nope, it's me. It's me. Sorry.
I was like, really, it is?
So no, it's me. I feel like I just asked you like 40 million questions. So yeah. So this is a very controversial topic for a lot of people, and to make a change in practice and using our vocabulary in a studio setting, there's a lot of people who might prefer to avoid this topic completely and pretend like it doesn't exist, rather than make this cultural shift, right? So what are the benefits to youth who are immersed in an LGBTQ affirmative environment? It's a positive environment. What are the benefits to youth who are immersed in that space versus those that are not?
Yeah, so many benefits. The number one answer is you're preventing suicide. That's it. 48% of LGBTQ teens have seriously considered suicide in the last year.
Wow.
And I can guarantee you that you have LGBT youth in your studios. It doesn't matter what they look like. It doesn't matter if you think they look queer. They're there. And if they're not there, they're going to be there soon. So you can prepare yourself. You are doing suicide prevention. And the number one thing for suicide prevention for LGBTQ youth is to have supportive adults in their lives. It doesn't have to be their parent. It can be a teacher, and it can be a dance teacher. So that's the number one thing, is that you are literally saving lives. Dance studios are safe havens for people. If you are a dance teacher, you know that. My grandmother started going to a dance studio during World War II because it was her safe place to go. My mom went to a dance studio because it wasn't really safe or okay for her to be at home. I was lucky that I had safe places to go, but I saw many, many people at my dance studio where that was their home. And I know if you are a dance teacher watching this, that you have experienced that. And you know that you're creating this place for kids, that it's not just about turning them into professional dancers. It's not just about the style and getting the moves right. It's that you are creating a home where they feel safe. And if you're not doing that for every single one of your students, then you're really missing something. You have the opportunity to learn some really basic skills to make them feel safe and make them feel at home. And that's the biggest benefit that I can think of.
Right.
Thank you
That's
for that.
beautiful. Thank you. I mean, we care about every one of our students, and to have one of them go home and not return for any reason, but especially because they didn't feel like they belonged
They
anywhere.
didn't feel seen, yeah.
Yeah, like that's just heartbreaking. And that's something that you have to consider when you think about how you're running and what type of culture you have in your dance studio. And because of that, and because of the love that we have for our students as educators, I think many educators are committed to doing it. They want to do it. They want to take that step. Like,
I agree.
they know it's necessary. What they know they're going to get is blowback from parents. They know they're going to get people citing religious beliefs. They know that they're going to get people who are saying you're overstepping your boundaries, teaching my child about these things.
And it's not just about this conversation. It's about a lot of conversations.
Yeah, a lot of
I think that that's the concern with a lot of socio-cultural topics, that are affecting everybody in our world, but that really affect children. And in our industry, you have to contend with the way parents want to raise their children and the beliefs of those parents. And so what are some ways that dance studios can incorporate this education into their business operations, with their faculty, into their teacher-student relationships?
Yeah, there are a lot of ways. And there are a lot of different levels, right? If this is something that's brand new to you or you're like deep in it. So the main thing is just find ways to signify that you support LGBTQ youth. I mean, it might just be a sign in your hallway. It might be that you add the go around with names and pronouns that I mentioned. You can, in case you're taking notes, I did write up a few things that I can put a link to a Google Doc at the end. I will copy that in here shortly. Know your history. You are definitely, I think I mentioned before, like Alvin Ailey, Isadora Duncan, like you are teaching choreography that either is directly created by queer people or has a lineage that comes from queer people. Casually mention it and slip it into your teaching. Just say it. And then, some of the things that I mentioned around getting rid of gendered requirements, meaning, like we said, like masculinity and femininity are not bad things, but having a dress code that's girls do this and boys do that might not really be necessary, when you could say everyone could either do the pink tights and the pink leotard, or the white t-shirt and the black pants. Think about, what are your gendered requirements? Like, what are are there particular dance moves that only the girls do and only the boys do? I remember in high school, the day that all the girls got to like try out the boys' leaps and turns. And I realized I was actually really good at them. Like, oh, I can actually hop around and go a full circle. And I'm really good at that. Who knew? And I was like better at that than doing my fouettes. And I thought, oh, maybe I should do the boys' turns. Why aren't you teaching those things? If there are boys who want to take point, let them take point. Figure out, just start to notice, what are the ways that you're separating gender, and are those necessary? And do you have to do them?
And it's so interesting because we'll adopt if we have a boy in class, I've experienced this before, where they don't feel comfortable doing a certain movement because they just don't, for whatever reason, you modify it for them. So why aren't we doing that for everybody, right?
Exactly. What if your whole entire classroom functioned that way? That was, if you don't feel comfortable doing this move because maybe you're physically unable to do it, it doesn't fit with your gender, it doesn't, whatever, it doesn't feel good to your body, you modify it. I mean, we say that all the time. If it doesn't feel good to your body because you have a knee injury, we say don't drop to your knee. If it doesn't feel good to your body because it doesn't match your gender, do it differently.
Yeah.
You can modify things.
And having option A and option B, and that's just it for everybody.
Yeah.
Well, I think that we have had some great questions. Leigh, we like to end all of our episodes with, because we go from week to week, and we like to end them all giving our viewers one actionable item that you want them to take between this week and next week to make progress in this area. So, what's your homework assignment for our viewers out there?
Yeah. Okay. Your homework assignment is to find your people, find your group of allies who are going to help you on this journey in your dance studio.
Mhm.
Figure out if there are other teachers who are totally on board, if there are parents of LGBTQ youth, or if they're just passionate parents who are invested in your studio, who care about supporting kids. Maybe
Mhm.
you have friends or family members who you know are good at this stuff. Bring them in, get them in a group text, get them in an email chain, get them in on social media, whatever it is, and just start to talk about the things that you can do in your studio. Even if you don't make any tangible changes this week, it's not going to be a one week, one day change. You're not going to
Right.
suddenly be the most inclusive place. It's okay. It takes time. But
Mhm.
find your people who are committed to this work in the long run. Locate those people and decide to commit together. And if you don't know who those people are, reach out to me and you can consult with me. Um, yeah. So that is your homework for the week. And while I'm talking, let me give you my resource sheet that I made. Um,
Yay.
I will admit that I just like 2 hours before this call, I went, oh my gosh, we need a resource sheet. So uh, this is a Google Doc that I will keep adding to and maybe update. And if you have things that you want to add, you can comment or let me know. So let me just copy the link.
So while Leah is putting that in there, this is a great time to remind you, the homework assignment this week is know your history. Understand what has happened, why we're in this place. Find your people, as Leigh says, and do some self-reflecting. Look at the vocabulary that you use, all the time in your day-to-day, your classroom structure, and the way that you talk to your parents, your dancers, your faculty. Look at the vocabulary you're using and see if there's any modifications you can make. I know that I definitely have some things I took away from this today that I can change now immediately, even in the way I talk to my kids.
Mhm.
So consider removing your gender requirements with your things like your dress code, the movement that is offered up in a combo or in across the floor, or warm up. And take the steps initiative. It's free. So this one thing that we've been doing with Apollo is that's what the inspiration was for Beyond the Steps, as well as we have this free 4-part virtual course series that's going to tackle racism, gender equity, sexual abuse, and awareness, dance medicine, integrative dance, nutrition. I mean, it goes on and on. And we're going to tackle all these topics so you can go at your own pace. It's going to give you actionable items, resources, and education that you can implement now that will hopefully inspire you to pursue this journey of education and learn more. It's by no means going to cover everything, but it will hopefully inspire you to learn more. And again, you can take that absolutely free. So you can click the link in our bio on Instagram at Apollo Performance, or go to our website, apolloperformance.com, and you'll find the Steps 2020 initiative there. That'll be just how you get started with that. And Leigh, tell us how viewers can find you, to get in touch with you, to continue learning from you. I don't know if you do consults with studios, but tell us all that information now.
Sure. So I just shared a resource sheet into the Zoom chat. So if you all can copy that over to the other
I
places,
just did. It's
great.
in
Awesome.
Facebook right now.
And I'm also adding, I just launched my website for my private practice. So you can also find me at leighwitzling.com. You can find me on Instagram at leigh.witz. You can, write to me, email me. My contact info is on that resource sheet as well. So you can find me there. I definitely can do consults with dance studios. My main job is that I'm a psychotherapist. So I do sessions mainly with queer youth, with transgender teenagers. But I'm also really happy to talk to adults who work with queer youth or LGBTQ youth, and are just trying to figure out what do I do? How do I do better? And I can do kind of a full audit of what's going on at your studio or what's going on in any other place that you interact with teenagers. And we could consult in that way around mental health and well-being. So
Yeah, and I think that that tool, that resource for faculty is important because, like I said earlier, there is no governing body of dance. There is no regulatory organization. And so for studio owners to be on this journey and make this conscious choice is one thing. But then you have a lot of times studios have a ton of faculty that are teaching their classes, and to get them all on that same page and be committed in that same vein that you are, because you are running the organization, but they represent you. So
Mhm.
having the training for the faculty is crucial because they are also carrying on that mission of the studio and carrying on, that allyship of the studio. So, and I think that's lacking right now. I really do. YPAD's doing a lot of great work in so many areas. But I think gender identity and sexual orientation, we're still in this place of like, we need to have something, a better option here for
Mhm.
training.
Absolutely.
yeah, and just to add to that, I think one thing you can do is if you're feeling overwhelmed by all of these individual steps, like, oh my God, what do I do with bathrooms and locker rooms? We didn't even get to that. And
Right.
the dance styles and the outfits and oh my gosh, it's so much. Okay, first take a breath and write a mission statement. What is your goal? Are you trying to support people? Are you trying to make them feel welcome? Are you trying to turn people into professional dancers? Are you trying to train them to be prepared for running into these topics in the professional world? I mean, what is it that you want to get out of this? I hope that safety and well-being is a top priority and not just the professional thing, but that too.
Mhm.
Write your mission statement. Have a clear goal. Don't make this random jigsaw puzzle of things.
Right.
Really know what you're doing. Really know why you're doing this. That's my number one thing that you can do as a studio. And you can pass that on to your faculty members so that what they're doing is flowing into your mission.
And then that moves to the students too, because when you have a mission and a purpose, they then find mission and purpose sometimes in the things that you're doing. So it's just that, it streamlines a lot of things. Thank you so much, Leigh. I cannot thank you enough. We met through someone, and you have just been an amazing resource today. We have a comment here like, this is so enlightening. Thank you, here on Facebook Live. So people are definitely enjoying the comment from Kayla where you answered a question about masculine and feminine, wrote back, that helped me a lot. So there's definitely appreciation out there for you lending your knowledge and your resources here to us today. So we applaud you, and we definitely want to have you back now that we have a whole long laundry list of topics that have come off of this one topic. Thank you, Bree, for hanging in there with me every week. We are so happy I'm happy to work with you and be here with you. And to our viewers who are here in Zoom and who are out there in Facebook Live land, just thank you, thank you. We want you to join us next Friday. Oh my gosh, is that the 6th of November?
It is. It is.
6th of November for our 6th episode. Yeah. 6th of November on our 6th episode. That's special.
That's a big deal. I feel like we need to do something for that.
Right, exactly. The question next week is going to be calories, to count or not to count. So it is part of our nutrition series. So we have Dr. Kristen Kosinikin. Is that it? Kosinikin. I knew I was going to mess it up. I had to hear phonetically written out on my paper and everything. Kosinikin. No, Kosinikin.
You know what? We'll make this a game. We'll find out next week what it actually is.
Kristen Kosinikin, Dr. Kristen Kosinikin. So join us on Facebook Live, join us on Zoom. All the links to join us are in our bios on Instagram, at TPDC, on IG, and at Apollo Performance. And if you are in Zoom and you're registered with us, you will receive a recording of this episode to use and refer back to. So if you're not joining us on Zoom, you might want to go and register for all of the series so that you can get the recordings even if you miss it. Until then, please stay on your journey beyond the steps, and we will see you next Friday.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye, Leigh. Thanks so much.